something about that Turkish dog. Did not like walking around the world, so most of the time riding in the doghouse under the wagon. Finally, we got into some villages, and I mean, this is the situation. But why people actually was men and boys. You don't see any women in that picture because out in the eastern mountains of Turkey, if there were any women around, most of the time they'd be off in the background covering their face with a veil. But the men and boys would just gather around us. I mean, this was kind of a new experience for John and I. These people would gather around us, and we were mighty glad we had Eshbir along with us, because there we had an interpreter, somebody, of course, you know, that we could find out what these people were asking and what they thought of us and so on and so forth. And also we could get any kind of help, like a mule shot, which definitely was a problem with a language barrier, but Eshbir made the difference. Then Eshbir did have to say goodbye, because we'd made it all the way just outside of a village called Dobaiza, Turkey, close to the Iranian border. Before Eshbir left, he got a picture of all of us together. Drifter, our little Turkish dog, Willie Make It, 2, our big, wonderful, lovable Portuguese mule, John, my brother right there, our Turkish wagon with the American canvas, the USA Turk machine, and that's me, Dave. And over there in the background, Eshbir captured a very special mountain in his country. It's called Mount Ararat. It's about 16,600 feet, mostly in Turkey, partly in Iran and Russia, and famous, of course, because lots of people claim Noah's Ark is located on that mountain. Then Eshbir said goodbye. He hopped on the bus. He went back home. And John and I, Willie and Drifter, we crossed into Iran. And yes, indeed, we did have to get our mule shot. And would you believe it? You know, we didn't have anybody around to interpret, to translate. And did we have a problem? I mean, it wasn't easy. Getting somebody to shoe that big mule, finding somebody was difficult, and then they didn't want to do it because these blacksmiths were very afraid of that big Portuguese mule. They were used to docile horses and little donkeys. So I had to stand behind to make sure Willie didn't kick, and of course, you can see Willie was keeping his eye on the blacksmith, and John was up there trying to calm Willie down a little bit, and finally we got our mule shot. And something else, the shoes didn't last very long in those countries, because the iron, the metal, was very poor metal, and they'd only last about, 150 miles. It was back in the USA at the Big Valley Ranch in Winona, Minnesota, when they put on a pair of shoes on our first mule, that those shoes lasted for 1,000 miles because they were borium tipped. Then we walked into Tehran, Iran, and right outside of Tehran, Iran, we found that huge monument. I mean, we were impressed. I mean, stop and think. The United States, a young country, it's just a little over 200 years old. Iran, part of the Persian Empire, they built that monument, or at least it was finished about 1969 to celebrate their 2500th birthday. Well, I hope our country, the USA, lasts 2,500 years. Finally, we left Tehran, Iran, and headed over the Alvarez Mountains. Now, these were the highest mountains that we walked across walking around the world. They aren't the highest mountains in the world. They do get up there around 18,000 feet, and the road gets up there around 12,000 feet. And there were some places that road was mighty steep. And we just left Tehran, and we loaded up our wagon with lots of food and plenty of water, because on the other side of the mountains, desert country, and I want to tell you, we had some tough going. Willie had some tough going. There were times we had to be behind that wagon giving Willie a little boost to get across the Alvarez Mountains. And then we got into the desert country, and we started to see camel drivers. And that wasn't always so much fun, because some of these camel drivers, like the guy in the picture there, decided that they wanted to trade their camel for our mule. Now, no way did we want a camel. I mean, not to mention the fact we loved that big mule. We'd spent a lot of time with that mule, and that mule was doing the job. We certainly didn't know a thing about camels. But the thing is that these guys had never seen a mule like that, apparently. They just were mesmerized by that big mule, and they wanted to trade. In this particular case, the guy kept saying, yes, 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 and I kept saying, no, no, no. Then some of his friends started walking over, and my brother John said, uh-oh, they're going to take Willie away from us. I said, wait a minute. Remember what the Americans told us back at the American Embassy? If you guys have a problem in the villages of these countries, remember that people are very poor. Animal driver there probably only made $1 or $2 American a week. So the embassy told us keep $3 or $4 American in our pocket. So I reached in, whipped out $4 or $5 American. Everything changed. The camel driver's eyes got very big, grabbed the American money. His friends ran over. John and I, Willie and Drifter, were on our way walking out of that village. And I think that worked for us pretty well in countries like Iran and Afghanistan. We made one last major stop in Iran, the holy city of Mashhad. And you can see shrines and mosques and lots of things like that. Of course, the men and boys and little girls were just, again, fascinated by that big mule. John and I, we were back here because we were loading up on water. That's why we had to stop to get water, because we're in that desert country and we needed lots of water. It was summertime. It was hot. And heading into Afghanistan, by the way, Afghanistan is just about exactly halfway around the world from the USA. So we were about halfway point here. We walked into that desert country and the border guards were waiting for us. And that border guard right there spoke a little English. You can see he's giving my brother John a great big almond club. And he said, and I got one, of course, the man said, in my country you have to be careful of the Kochi dogs. Well, of course, Kochis are nomads that live out in the desert. They're fine people. They have big dogs, and those dogs are trained to attack anybody that goes near the campsite. Later on, we need those big sticks to fend off those dogs. Then that man did something that was quite shocking, you might say. He reached in his jacket pocket, pulled out a letter, and handed it to me. I looked at the letter, and I realized it was from the American embassy. It had been sent to the border, and was waiting for us. So I ripped open the letter from the American embassy, and I'll always remember one paragraph. It said, "Make no mistake, you are in some danger in this country. The people in this country will kill you for your possessions or for the resentment of it being in their country, and it happens more often than most Americans realize." So with that, we knew we were going to be on an adventure walking the desert country of Afghanistan, and the border guards, they knew it was dangerous. Before they would allow us to leave the border walking, they assigned 2 soldiers, one with rifle and the other with pistol, to go with us to protect us across the desert of Afghanistan. And heading out into the desert country, maybe 50 miles or so, we started to see those nomads, those coaches. And I can tell you right now, those dogs don't look very big in this picture, but those dogs were ferocious. They came after us about 1/8 of a mile away from the campsites, barking and growling, and we had to fight them off with those big clubs. But you see the man there and his little boys? When the people would come out, they'd hear the dogs barking, they'd take a good look at us, and they'd realize we're no threat to them. When we had soldiers with us, they called the dogs back, and everything was all right. As a matter of fact, those people were so nice, they even offered us water. And was that important? You know, when we were crossing the Afghan desert of death in the summertime, the temperatures got up to 128 degrees. We needed lots of water. One of the times I was getting water from the nomad people in Afghanistan, I got up and got a good close look at their homes. You know, the tents are made out of goat hair, and they're fascinating. If you get up real close, you can see through the goat hair like that. Now you know what that means. It means they have air conditioning. Not spoiled American air conditioning where you flick on a switch. Natural air conditioning where the hot air rises up off the desert floor through the goat hair tent. Fascinating people. And then a village. And you know, we really didn't have to stop in a village because we had our wagon. We had food, we had water, we could sleep in the wagon. But you know, we're spoiled Americans here. And it was hot and we were thirsty and our water was in plastic containers. And you can imagine what that water was like when it's over 120 degrees, hot and yucky. And of course, I'm thinking like the USA, you see a town, you go to somebody's house, you go to the refrigerator, get a nice ice cold drink of water. I say, "Hey John, let's go into the village, get something cold to drink." Didn't work out that way. We got into the village, found out that people lived in mud brick houses, kept their belongings in straw huts. They didn't have any electricity, so they didn't have a refrigerator. They didn't have a kitchen faucet, they didn't have a toilet, they didn't have a shower because they didn't have running water. They had to go outside their house to a hole in the ground, their well, to get their water. So guess what? We didn't get any ice cold water. As a matter of fact, we got what everybody drinks in Afghanistan, winter or even extreme summertime, and that was hot tea. Now, how would you like to give up all your ice cold pop, all your ice cold milk, all your ice cold water, and all summer long the only thing you'd have to drink is hot tea? Well, I'll tell you something, at least it's better than nothing. You're not going to die of thirst. And you know why it was hot tea? See those little boys and girls sitting right there? Well, lots of little boys and girls in that country called Afghanistan die before they're 7 years old. One major reason, the water that comes out of those wells throughout that whole country is so bad, so full of germs, bacteria, you just scoop it up and drink it, liable to kill you. So you have to, in the hot summertime, build a fire, boil the water, kill the germs, and nobody wants to drink boiled water, so they make it into hot tea. Fantastic people, though. They did help us out, even though we had a language problem. We used a lot of sign language. And then one day something happened that was just absolutely unbelievable. I mean, here we are, halfway around the world, walking in a country called Afghanistan, and I heard a voice behind the wagon. "Hey, what are you guys doing with that mule?" Looked around, there's 2 American guys riding bicycles. Now, I don't care where you go in the world, you're going to find Americans. Because Americans love to travel, they love to go on adventure. These 2 guys had been going to school in Paris, France. And during summer vacation, they hopped on their bikes and they're bicycling about 6,000 miles from Paris to New Delhi, India. So we had a nice talk with those guys, and then they're gone. We couldn't keep up. They were riding their bikes about 125 miles a day in the flat desert country. John and I, Willie and Drifter, well, halfway around the world, we were pretty strong. We may have been pushing 30 miles a day. And we made it all the way to the capital city of Afghanistan called Kabul. And I mean to tell you, things were different. I mean, take a look. There's a little boy wearing a turban just like his dad. There's a little girl completely covered up from head to toe, just like her mother. It's called the Shottery in Afghanistan. And that's not all that was different. We stayed there for about a week. And while we were there, my brother John said, "Hey, let's go see a ball game. Let's take in the national sport." Of course, we're thinking baseball. But in Afghanistan, for their national sport, they didn't use a baseball, a basketball, a soccer ball, or a football. They used a 40-pound dead goat. And the idea is that those horsemen fight over that dead goat. It's called bushkashi. Very dangerous game. You get there someday, you be careful. Because see these people right here? Well, there's no real boundaries to that game. And those people standing there are in danger. And we were standing there that day, and when those horsemen whipping each other, bumping their horse to each other, and decide you're going to charge into the crowd, you run for your life. That day, 2 people didn't make it. One little boy and one old man were trampled to death. So bushkashi is probably the world's most dangerous national sport. Finally, we had to be on our way. Heading out of Kabul, Afghanistan, we left more or less the desert behind, and we headed into the foothills of the Hindu Kush Mountains. And then, the major tragedy of the walk. This is the last picture you'll see of my brother John. 3 days after that picture was taken, we were attacked by bandits. My brother John was shot and killed. I was shot and wounded. And this is the story of what happened to us. One night about 10 o'clock, just about 100 miles from Kabul, Afghanistan, in the mountain country, we pulled our wagon just off the main road. And that is the main road across Afghanistan leading to the Khyber Pass near Sarobi. And it was about 10 o'clock when all of a sudden our dog Drifter heard a noise, jumped out of the doghouse. Of course, we looked out, sure enough, bandits, 6 of them, coming toward our campsite. Now, we didn't have any police with us, because the police thought we had passed the most dangerous area of Afghanistan, the desert area. But one police captain who spoke little English, before he left with his men in his jeep, he gave us advice. He said, just in case the bandits come in the mountains of my country, don't you shoot anybody. If you shoot somebody in my country, it's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And if the relatives don't kill you, their friends will, and if that doesn't happen, government send you out of the country, your walk is finished. Don't have to shoot anybody. Bandits come, you say, bodo, bodo, bodo. That means go away. If that doesn't work, then you grab your gun, you point it in the air, you fire a warning, and when they see you have a weapon you're willing to fight, they'll go away. And you know something? I think that's good advice, and most of the time would work in Afghanistan. But you see those letters on our wagon, UNICEF, stands for UNICEF? Well, of course we're walking around the world, #1 for our adventure, our experience, our education, to see the world, to prove that man can do anything, to get into Guinness Book of World Records. But along with that, we thought, hey, why not do something for somebody else? So we picked UNICEF because it's for kids, United Nations Children's Fund. Why not do something to help kids? But we knew better than to collect money. No way were we going to collect any money. But we were telling people that we meet along the way that if they'd like to send in a donation to UNICEF, we were sure UNICEF would be glad to get the money. But unfortunately, back in Kabul, the capital city of Afghanistan, when a newspaperman wanted to do a story on us, which of course happened all around the world, this newspaperman made a major mistake. He only spoke Dari and very little English. And of course, we spoke only English. And he printed in his Afghani newspaper, by mistake, that we were collecting money, had been collecting money for 2 years, and had all the money in the wagon. Why, even the American embassy can't figure out why the man printed that. And these bandits that came after us, turned out that they weren't the normal bandits. These guys were already wanted for murder and robbery. That's how I got that picture, after the fact, at the Kabul police station. And those bandits had read about us having all that money. They'd been watching us for 3 days, and that night, in the middle of nowhere, they came. Well, when we heard Drifter barking, of course, we jumped out of the wagon, we took a look, and 6 bandits coming toward our campsite. We told them to go away many times, bodo, bodo, many times. They kept right on coming. So we did as we were told. I grabbed the gun, fired the warning shot, and the bandits turned and they fled. And I thought it was over. I even looked at my brother John and I said, well, I guess the police captain was right. But the bandits, having read that we had a wagon full of money, moments later they came back with no warning, surrounded us, and just started shooting. The first bullet hit me in the chest and knocked me to the ground. The second bullet hit my brother John in the heart and killed him instantly. No pain. My brother John was killed instantly. Of course, I didn't know that. Face down on the ground, heard the bandits running toward us, hollered at my brother John to play dead, and I went limp. And about that time, another shot. According to Dr. Meady, the American doctor, told me later that although my brother John was killed instantly with no pain, a bullet through the heart, his body no doubt was moving. The bandit saw that, shot him again. So I am mighty lucky to be here. First bandit got to me, grabbed me by the arm, and rolled me over, which of course, let me tell you, I let